What's going on, good people? This is a sports week that has quite a bit to talk about. We're going to break down several of the things that has happened during this week. I'm your host Zay, along with my guy BK. Holla at the people, BK.
Hey, y'all. Happy Thursday.
So, man, we've had some upsets. We've had some head scratching moments. We've had some teams that have come through in the clutch. We've had some teams that don't know what clutch is at all. So we're going to start out with the good word for the week. BK, what we got for the people?
So first, what to you was the biggest surprise in the NFL in week 1?
Well, I say this is there's two. One really wasn't a big surprise to me, but my Patriots beat up on the Bengals, right? You saw that, right?
I did.
Yeah. So yeah, it surprised. I'm sure it surprised everyone else. But BK, I told you, Vegas was tripping, saying we were only going to win four games. I told you a lot of the fans were tripping, saying that we were going to have a trash team. We only have to score slightly above 14 points and we can win the game. I literally said that several times this offseason. Our defense is good enough that we don't have to have a superstar quarterback. We don't. We don't have to have a stellar offense. We just need a hold it in the road offense that can play keep away from the other offense because our defense is going to ensure that our offense has an opportunity to stay within the game and not have to play outside of themselves. And if Drake May comes in, and I would say it's a fair assessment and it's fair to say that Drake May should be as good as or better than Jacoby Brissett, if not immediately, pretty close to it. I also understand the reason why they kind of want to hone his skills and kind of hold the reins a little bit so that he doesn't, become gun shy and we kind of screw up the whole situation. But I'm telling you, with that defense, with that cornerback, my cornerback shut down Jamar Chase. Shut him down. I know that surprised a lot of folks. Surprised me a little bit, but we know that Burrow tends to have a slow start and then he kind of, you know, turns into what we knew he should have been the whole time a little bit later on. But that was one of the things that surprised me just a little bit. And the other thing that surprised me is on the other end of the spectrum. The Panthers changed a whole lot, but nothing at all to change. And it's sad. They spent a whole bunch of money on offensive linemen. They went and got a new head coach. They went and got wide receivers. They did a lot in the offseason. They attempted to cross every T and dot every I for that performance against a lowly Saints team that they made look like juggernauts. And Carolina's going to look even worse when the Saints play a competent team and we realize that they aren't very good. So those are the two things that I would say surprised me the most in week 1 of the NFL.
Yeah, I think when I watched the Bengals upset take place, I could only imagine how much you smiled and talked trash during that game. Um, but I think for me, there were really a couple things, and I'm going to kind of highlight what you shared, which is I was really surprised at how poorly the Bengals played. Like they historically get off to a slow start. They've been 0-2 a lot in the Joe Burrow era. So and they play Kansas City this week, so that's on the road. That's not going to be great. Um, but so they're probably staring at 0-2 this year too. But that said, it doesn't surprise me they got off to a slow start. They had some off-season distractions with Higgins and Chase. So, there's that. And also, how would Burrow play in his first real game back? So, so there was a lot of question marks. And like you've been telling us and me and everyone who's willing to listen, the Patriots defense is legit really good. Their offense is dreadful, but their defense is legit. And so if they can just keep themselves in the game and not make mistakes on offense and beat themselves, they're going to have a chance. You are right about that. I think the other thing that's really sad going back to the Panthers, and I'm going to add one thing. I know this because being a Washington fan, having Dan Snyder as your owner, and just what an absolute asshat he was as an owner. And the Cowboys are dealing with the same thing with Jerry Jones, meddlesome Jerry. How about Mr. Tepper, who literally fires a coach, then hires a new one, and after the week one debacle, already has a coach owner meeting with the coach about all the things he did wrong in week one and what's his plan to fix it. Like, look, make no mistake, that was an embarrassing blowout loss and they got annihilated. But it doesn't warrant a meeting with your owner after week one, especially knowing that you don't really try in preseason anymore. So literally the first 4 games have become almost like exhibition games that count because
Agreed.
none of your players have been playing.
I saw that and I was like, wow, so this is what we're doing. This is what's going to make the situation better. Having a come to Jesus moment after week one. Like you wouldn't be patting them on the back and saying congratulations for the season after week one. Not to mention the fact that what made you think that this team would be ready to compete after one game after the season that they had last year? I mean, I don't know. That's just seemed a bit much to me. Let me ask you this though.
Yeah.
Let's move on to week 2. What will be the biggest NFL upset in week 2 as far as you're concerned?
Well, Zay, during our time last week, someone might have mentioned that the biggest upset would be, at least that I called, was the Steelers plus 3.5 against the Falcons. And remember how I mentioned a certain Kirk Cousins was due for 2 picks and we haven't even played yet? And he threw 2 official ones and missed 4 more that should have been picked. Like he was, and look, the Steelers were really good on defense.
Yeah.
But Cousins was terrible. Like, as Charles Barkley would say, terrible. Just terrible.
The way TJ Watt just shut down Bijan Robinson, TJ Watt is a stud. Don't hear what I'm not saying. But I didn't think that any linebacker would be able to just essentially say, hey, that's your guy. Don't let him do anything. And he did much of nothing. I hope Atlanta can kind of get on the right course. I have high hopes for what they're going to do this season in general. But that defense, and going back to something that you just said a little bit ago, without really doing very much in preseason, Cousins not really doing a whole lot in the offseason due to the injury that he was trying to get over, and there being a whole lot of new moving pieces as far as that offense and defense is concerned, coaching staff, all that good stuff. That's not the defense that you want to try to toy around with new things with. So,
exactly.
Yeah, that really didn't surprise me.
I say all that to say that we're going to try to go 2-0.
Okay.
And so, and this will probably make you scratch your head and some people out there. But I like Tampa Bay plus. In some places, I was able to get Tampa Bay plus 7.5. For purpose of this show, we'll say 7. But I like Tampa Bay plus 7 versus the Lions. And here's why. Tampa Bay typically tends to play Detroit tough. The Lions had an emotional win on Monday night. They have a short week, after that upset, or maybe it was Sunday night, but still, it's a shorter week where they had to go into overtime. They blew a big lead. They had to save themselves from that. They were able to win it in overtime. They have a shorter week. I just think that, and look, I know they only played Washington, but Tampa Bay looked legitimately pretty good, better than I expected them to see. Forget the competition. They looked better than I thought they would. I just think this has some upset potential, but I definitely love them to cover the 7 or 7.5, depending on when you get it.
One thing you have to keep in mind about Tampa Bay is they have a legit defense and they have offensive weapons that when they're clicking on all cylinders, they can put up points with the best of them. They're also employing an offense right now that is from the McVay tree. So I was telling you guys this offseason, Chris Godwin, barring injury, he's going to be one of those guys that sneaks up on everybody because he's playing that Cooper Cup role. So yeah, +7. First of all, at 7.5 is a hard cover for any NFL team on any given Sunday. But that particular team, with the history that they have, I can definitely see how that may end up on a list that we'll discuss a little bit later with BK's best bets. For me, the biggest upset, I say biggest, but I have two. So Titans over Jets. Actually, no, I have three. I'm sorry. Titans over Jets. The Browns figure it out against the Jaguars. And the Patriots over Seattle. I think the Patriots defense will be able to lock down the Seattle offense. They're already having injuries at running back. If Walker doesn't go with that oblique injury, that's going to be an issue. The Titans, if not for Levis having complete mental breakdowns at times in the game, they had their game won, and they would have looked good doing it if it wasn't for his, I believe, 3 turnovers. The Jets are all discombobulated. Aaron Rodgers, he's just – we're going to talk about him in detail in a little bit, but I believe his better days are behind him. The Browns, I feel like we have a situation where you have a bad team going up against a team that's not very good. So I kind of have a feeling that the Browns will be able to figure out a few things, attempt to create an identity, and the Jags always lose a game that they weren't necessarily supposed to lose. So that's why I'm putting these three out there as far as upsets for week 2. And I know you always go by Vegas. I'm just kind of going by the directions of what most fans would say should be easy games to call.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I know the Browns are underdogs +3. Um, I think the Patriots are getting 3 or 3.5 at home. So they're all pretty close. But yeah, I think you bring up a lot of great points. The thing that I would say about, some of those teams specifically are, in the Browns case, it was just a really bad matchup for them against Dallas in week 1 because the Browns are missing 2 starting offensive linemen. They're still missing Nick Chubb, who's still recovering from injury. And we're going to talk about Mr. Watson a little bit later in the program. And I have a lot to say about him. But I'll just say that, Dallas played a really good game, one of the better ones. They, I think, played better than their capabilities this Sunday, and caught the Browns at the right time. Sometimes when you play these games, timing is everything, and the Browns were ripe for that upset.
Agree. So, reactions, biggest takeaways from week 2 in college football. What you got?
Well, the biggest thing I think for me, Zay, is how many playoff contenders struggled. And you and I both know, we talk about this, there should be no rankings before October 1st.
Yes.
Since there are, and teams are fraudulently, rated. Right. Notre Dame, a 28
Oh,
and a half point favorite against Northern Illinois, right? They got upset at home by Northern Illinois. Do you know that Northern Illinois, a little did you know, they were 0-14 against top 10 teams all time. And they beat Notre Dame, who just beat A&M. It was a killer. But they weren't the only. Now, granted, they were the only ones who stubbed their toe badly and broke it. But look at Penn State. They were a 34 and a half point favorite and had to pull that one. They survived Bowling Green at home. Look at Oklahoma. They were a 29 and a half point favorite at home. And they beat Houston 16-12. Like, you add those scores together, they didn't cover the spread. So that's how bad that was. And then let's not make a mistake. Alabama. If for those of you who just looked at the score, you're like, oh, well, Alabama beat South Florida by 26. They killed them. As a good friend of mine that I like to talk about, Mr. Lee Corso would say, not so fast, my friends. Little history lesson. Bama is a 31-point home favorite over South Florida, was up 14-13 through three quarters. And with 7 minutes to go in the game, they were up 21-16. Does that sound like a blowout to anybody out there? So, and then look, Oregon was a 19-point favorite, Arizona a 35-point favorite, and they barely escaped upset. In fact, Oregon was down in the fourth quarter to Boise State. They had to survive that one. So, other quick takeaways. It was part of my best bets. It was actually one of your bets that you called out and asked me about. Texas and Tennessee were very impressive. They both looked terrific in statement wins. I also think there's a huge gap at the top. I think at this point we have three teams. We have Georgia, Ohio State, otherwise known as the Ohio State
Ohio
University,
State University.
and Texas. And then there's everybody else. And then the last thing that I wanted to bring up, how about the Pac-12 got a little bit bigger today? They were down to two teams, and they're now up to six. They added Boise State, San Diego State, Fresno State, and Colorado State. So starting 2026, they have six teams. And just in case for those who don't know this, they need two more teams by 2026 to be eligible to still maintain their conference. They need at least 8. What was your biggest takeaways from week 2?
Notre Dame. What in the world are we doing? You beat Texas A&M, you turn around and you lose to the school for the blind. You know how bad you make me look when I sit up there and I praise your name week 1, and then you turn around and lose to a school that always loses to anyone worth mentioning? Trash. That's horrible. What are you doing? Wait, there's more. Iowa. I said you had an offense that was heading down the right path. You were looking good. All you had to do was add the offense that you were showing to the defense that you already had. Iowa. This is why you can't have nice things. You turn around and lose to your little brother, the Cyclones. No one's scared of the Cyclones. Iowa State, you lose to Iowa State. Come on, man. What are we doing? Then we turn around and Pac-12. I understand that you need 8 teams to be eligible to be considered a conference. But what are we doing? Like, just fold at this point, because adding the school for the hearing impaired, the school for the blind, and we can't compete. We can't expect to compete when every school that you have in your conference will be an underdog against almost every opponent that they go against in the Power Five. I wouldn't even consider you. I wouldn't even consider you to be a Power Five conference. You're just a conference. Doesn't matter who else you add. It doesn't matter. One other thing I'm going to throw out there. Actually, you know what? No, I'm going to save that for. I'm going to save that for another segment that we're going to do about the most overrated. We'll get to that in just a second.
Let me ask you this question,
Yes,
Zach.
sir.
Going back to your Iowa comment. So you and I talked about this.
Okay, BK, you were right. Okay. All right, you're right.
And one of us was not as excited about their offense as someone else. But let me ask you this. That's not where I was going with this. Some of us had a vested interest in Iowa minus 2.5. And so for those of us who may or may not have had an interest, let me ask you this. So Iowa was up 19-7 after scoring a touchdown, I would say about 7, 8, 9 minutes to go in the third quarter. And they elected to go for 2 to make it a 2 full touchdown game, 21-7. And I immediately cringed because most normal schools, I would think you'd have a quarter and a half to score again, but this is Iowa. And so I know with their offense, every point counts. And so I would have kicked the point and make it 20-7 and force them to, and again, you still have a quarter and a half to score another field goal to be okay. So were you okay with them going for 2 there? Do you think that was the right play? Would you have kicked the point? Do you think I'm crazy for wanting to kick the point? I just think it's too early to be chasing points. What are your thoughts?
I'll say this. Whenever you can put points on the board, I'm a fan of doing so. But I'll also say a lot of other things went wrong as far as coaching, as far as play on the field for the result that took place, more so than just that kick or the kick that didn't happen. I put it that way. So at the end of the day, the coach did what he thought made sense at the time. I can see the logic behind trying to go up by full 2 touchdowns. And maybe they were drinking their own Kool-Aid the way that I was and thought that their offense was better and that they were just going to be able to put up points anyway. But then I have to ask myself, if that's the way you truly feel, why did the 1 extra point matter if you felt like your offense was good enough to just kind of go up and down the field either way you slice it? So was it a mistake? Sure. Is it the mistake that cost them the game? Not really. But I can tell you this year just feels a little bit different to me. And I say that because I feel like a lot of big name blue bloods are going to be taken down this year. And a lot of the teams that just end up being better are going to have the opportunity to show that it's not about the name of the school and it's not about where you're ranked in preseason and all of that kind of good stuff. A lot of those teams are going to have the opportunity to show that, well, had you given us a shot previously, maybe the outcome would have been a little bit different in years past as well. But I just really have a feeling that some of these quote unquote little brother teams are going to show up big brother this year. And a lot of these blue bloods are going to be praising the football gods that 12 teams get into the playoffs and not just the top 4, because there are going to be a few teams that take some losses that they didn't see coming.
Agreed. So with that being said, I was really curious to see, what teams do you think are on your overrated and underrated list so far through 2 weeks?
Well, I guess we'll go ahead and kick off our truth and nothing but the truth. And this, again, personal opinion, and I have my reasons, but my truth and nothing but the truth, several overrated teams. The first one I'll start out with, Clemson. You're not who you think you are, but you're not the only one. You're not in the same class or tier that you used to be in, and you still think that that window from yesteryear is still open. That window has been closed, nailed, gorilla glued, and duct taped. You're done. There's your own stubbornness in not being willing to take players out of the transfer portal and having this, oh, we have all the guys in the locker room that we need type of mentality has put you behind the eight ball. And I believe it's put you behind the eight ball to the point that you're not going to catch up with a lot of these other schools because the cachet that you had previously, these kids aren't looking at you that way anymore. You got to understand, you have a 4-year window with most of these kids. They aren't, unless their parents, grandparents, sister, brothers, whoever went to your school, they have a 4-year attention span. What have you done for me lately? And in the last few years, that hasn't been much as far as Clemson is concerned.
And real quick to jump in, Zay, I think that's spot on because I say all the time when it comes to, I call them the orange team because in South Carolina, they don't have a name. But the orange team, I've said this for quite a while, which is when Dabo can just be a recruiter and a cheerleader, and they have a once in a generation quarterback like Deshaun Watson in college or Trevor Lawrence, who were both historically great there, and you pair them with their defense, and Dabo's the third best coach on his staff, then they're really, really legitimately dangerous. But currently, Dabo's the best coach on that staff, and their quarterback is terrible. Forget what he did last week in a fluke moment against a team that just timing was bad. But he that team that's going to be like, he likes to talk about like if I was buying a stock, I'd buy us cuz we're going to win 2 more titles in the next 4 years. Like I would love to drink what he's drinking cuz it's not happening. He wouldn't win the title if there were 4 teams that made it. So I'm just saying, like, yeah, you're absolutely right about that. That program is a mess.
Number 2 on my overrated, that team up north, known to most people that aren't Ohio State Buckeye fans, known as Michigan. I get it. You won the championship last year. Kudos to you. But today's team isn't yesterday's team. Today's coach isn't yesterday's coach. And be glad that there are preseason rankings that put you where you were based on what you did last year, because your squad ain't it. And it doesn't look like your defense is quite as good or your offense when your boy Scallion ain't out there getting all the plays for you. Just an observation, just saying. You're not looking anywhere close to what you used to be. And just to be honest, what you used to be wasn't exactly consistent anyway. You had your year. I'll give you your brownie points for that year, even though you cheated during that year and you hadn't done much other than, your Super Bowl was beating us, and you did that. I'll give you that. You did beat the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ohio State decided that we were going to go out and get an offensive coach that only has the coach offense, and he was great coaching the offense when he was a head coach in Chip Kelly. So now we don't have to worry about Ryan Day. So, yeah, I think that Michigan is another one of those overrated teams, and it was based on what they did last year with a completely different team and a completely different head coach. I have 2 more teams on my list. Oregon, you were supposed to be one of them. You were supposed to come out swinging. I gave you the benefit of the doubt week 1. Week 2, you came out and won by the skin of your teeth. I got to look at you as being what you look like until you show me something different. And I thought that Oregon was going to end up being the second best team in the Big Ten. Right now, I like the way USC is looking a lot better than the way Oregon is looking as far as Big Ten teams. In Oregon, I mean, you're going to have to come out swinging this week, or I think you should drop substantially in the rankings. Lastly, Colorado.
Mhm.
You're not nearly as good as Deion Sanders thinks you are. And at this point in time, a lot of the newness, if you will, a lot of the happy thoughts and the champagne wishes and caviar dreams that we thought were going to be bestowed upon the Colorado Buffs simply by the mere presence of Deion Sanders, it's not working out that way. I'm sorry, you're just not it. And I'm gonna be honest with you. After Deion Sanders' sons graduate, I don't know if he's gonna be there very much longer. So you better enjoy it while you got him, because I could see him either going to another school, or I could see him possibly going pro. I
Mhm.
mean, what he did financially for Colorado can be duplicated. And one thing we know about the NFL, if it makes money, they'll give it a shot. There's several teams that I can see throwing Sanders a bone and hoping for the best just because of the name value that he's going to, or the branding, if you will, that he's going to bring with him. And if he can do that in Colorado, he can do it for any NFL team. So that rounds out my list of overrated teams.
So I'm going to piggyback on the Colorado thing because one of our faithful followers brought up Dion returning to his alma mater, coaching the Knolls. Should they let go of Norvell? And it pains me to say anything negative about a former beloved Knoll, but if you can't win at Colorado, where you're in a much easier league, and there were no expectations outside of your pedigree and reputation, right? And your celebrity status. How are you going to win at a top 10 program? Like, Florida State's a top 10 job. So, like, you got to prove that. And there's a reason why Colorado, their win total projection for 2024 was 6 games. Does that sound like a team going in the right direction? And by the way, a little did you know, because you know I like my numbers. Since they started out 3-0 last year and grabbed social media in the college football world by storm, since that 3-0 start, prime time has turned into puke time because they're 1-10 in their last 11 games. Now, I don't, I'm great at counting my money when it comes to betting, but I'm not a math major. But I'm not sure 1-10 is good by any measuring stick.
I agree. Um, I'll say this: before he got there, they won 2 games, and if he does win 6 games, it'll be more games than he won last year. Maybe. I mean, right direction doesn't mean that you still aren't overrated for where you are now. So I believe that we gave Dion too much credit for what we thought he would be able to do with that particular team so soon, at least. I didn't see that coming anyway. I thought the 3 games in a row was flukish to begin with, but it started that forest fire that just wouldn't go out even when they started losing. you don't see quite as many bandwagoners. There were a lot of people that jumped on, and they jumped right off somewhere in between loss 1 and 10. But that's kind of where we are.
So, real quick, here are my overrated, underrated for this week. I'm going to start with the underrated because I only have a few teams. And all of them are ranked at this point within the top 15, but I don't think people are talking about them enough. One team you actually did reference, which is Southern Cal. Their defense seems to be improved now that they have a legitimate coordinator. No more Alex Grinch. He's terrible. Was terrible at Oklahoma and even worse at USC. So I'm glad that Lincoln Riley canned him and got a better defensive coordinator. But their quarterback looks really good. I thought there'd be a huge drop off from Caleb Williams. I mean, anytime you lose the number one pick, you expect to have some drop off there. And there has been some, but he's played really well. So Southern Cal would be an underrated team. I don't think they're getting enough credit for just how talented they are. The other two teams, Tennessee and Missouri. Look, I know Missouri's played nobody, but when you beat two teams 89-0, like you still got, I mean, and we talked about it before, right? Notre Dame, Penn State, Alabama, Oklahoma, Oregon, Arizona. All these teams are big favorites and struggled to escape. Missouri's having no such trouble. And Tennessee, they absolutely took the Wolfpack to the woodshed last week. Like that was, it had it not been in North Carolina, it would have been a crime in most states. That's how bad that beating was. And I think Tennessee needs to get more credit and love, and especially Missouri. In the SEC, everyone wants to talk about Georgia and Alabama. And look, I understand why for the right reasons. And I'm not saying Tennessee and Missouri or Georgia or Alabama. To quote my buddy over here and co-host, don't hear what I'm not saying. But both things can be true. You can heap praise on how great Georgia is and how historically great Bama is, especially under the Saban years. But Tennessee and Missouri are top 10 teams for a reason. They're really good. And I think that that needs to be said. As far as the overrated, there's a lot of teams, but I'll do it quick. Florida State, no surprise. You're big favorites in 2 games. You lay an egg both games. Your quarterback is trash. Absolutely is rooting a really solid team otherwise. In fact, if the Noles had Cam Ward like they should have had he not chosen to go pro, the Noles would be rolling through a mediocre ACC. Instead, I got to wonder, will we ever win a game? Michigan, for the reasons you mentioned, they lost a terrific head coach. They lost the top 10 quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. They lost wide receivers. They still are really good defense. Texas is just, in my opinion, that really good. They're just great on offense. They walk the ball up and down the field. But Michigan's offense is terrible. Like, I don't know how they're going to score. It's going to take an act of Congress to try to score. They're bad on offense. I think you'll see throughout the year, and if I'm wrong, I'll admit it, but I think Michigan's going to prove throughout the year their defense is really good. It's their offense that's trash. I think just Texas is that good. LSU, year 3 of Brian Kelly. This is the year they were supposed to be really good, right? Their defense couldn't be any worse than last year. Yeah, I know they lost 2 star receivers and their Heisman winning trophy quarterback in Jaden Daniels. But you lose to Southern Cal on a neutral site in a game that everyone assumed you'd win, except for me who bet otherwise. Then, shameless plug, my bad. Then you play Nicholls State at home, and for 2.5 quarters, you're struggling to beat Nicholls State. And Zay, you, me, and 9 friends could beat Nicholls State. So I don't know what's going on there. Utah, I hear how great they are, but Cam Rising already has a hand injury. Every year, Utah has a good team. Every year, he gets hurt. You look at the point spread, it's already dropped 3 or 4, depending on where you looked, because I'm pretty sure smart people know that he's not going to play. And so the line's plummeted because their backup quarterback blows. Oklahoma, 16-12 is it almost a 30-point favorite over Houston? What are we doing? Arizona, what are we doing? Notre Dame, we should call you Notre Shame. Like, how do you lose to Northern Illinois? Like, I understand having a letdown. 18 to 22-year-old kids, they read their press clippings. They're really excited about being A&M on the road when you were an underdog by 3 points and you won. I understand being excited. I understand that you're not motivated at home for Northern Illinois, but the talent gap is so huge that even if you're not motivated, you should still be able to handle Northern Illinois. Oregon, like you mentioned, I won't spend any more time because you outlined that perfectly. And lastly, Kentucky. Like, well, I gladly bet South Carolina plus 10 against Kentucky. I don't even think the most optimistic person would have thought that Carolina would have gone to Kentucky and beat them. That was a beatdown. And you know the prize that Kentucky gets for that beatdown? Oh, yeah, they get Georgia this week.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Let me ask you this. What do you think the LSU versus Gamecocks game is going to end up looking like?
I'm going to take a quick moment and for once not directly answer the question, say this. I am so excited that game day's coming to Columbia, South Carolina. It's been 10 years, and for them to come to Willie B and have LSU in Carolina, and look, I understand there's not a lot of big games this week, so, it is what it is. But it's a big deal. It's an exciting time in South Carolina. And I can't wait to see Williams-Brice. It's going to be rocking for that game. So excited for the fan base, excited for the university, exciting for that. That being said, Chip Kelly is a road favorite of 6 or more points, is 6-18 against the number. Make that 6-19. Carolina's getting 7.5. I got it at 7.5. I'll take the Gamecocks plus 7 at home. LSU's going to, I think it's going to be a defensive game, believe it or not. Carolina's defense is really good. Sellers has a cannon of an arm. They're able to do enough on the run game. John Emery, the star running back for LSU, is out for the year with an injury. Nussmeier's not the same quarterback, and they don't have the wideouts that are good as Neighbors, and I forget the other guy who also went pro. It's
Brian
hard to
Thomas.
Yeah, exact. Thank you. See, this is why we do this. But I just think it's going to be really hard in that atmosphere. I like the Gamecocks. Who do you like in that one?
I hedged my bet. Okay. So I bet somebody $20 that the Gamecocks lose. But if they win, I will feel like I personally bought the Gamecocks a victory. So either they win and I'm happy, or they lose and I'm happy. And where I'm from, that's what we call a win-win situation. So
we're both a big fan of win-wins, eh?
Gotta love it, right?
Yes.
I had one other team that was on my underrated. That's Miami. I think the Hurricanes have used the transfer portal beautifully. The transfer portal is looking great on Miami right now. And luckily for Miami, they get an opportunity to have a schedule that's going to be friendly for them, make them look really good this year, which is going to open up the floodgates next year to improve on that team. I don't see how they don't make the playoffs. And that's the team that I feel like can sneak up on some of the big boys. I know historically speaking, the Hurricanes are the U is one of those teams that is remembered with fondness from certain periods of time. But I think that they can make some noise this year. So that would be my last underrated team. We have a segment that we're gonna segue into. We always have a top 5 greatest of something. We've done ice cream, we've done vacation destination, we've done sports stuff, we've done all kind of stuff in our top 5. This week though, it's going back to sports, specifically college football. Top 5 greatest upsets in college football. BK, what's your number 5?
Well, Zay, that I was inspired by the Notre Dame upset, and this got me thinking about what would I have or what would we have is the 5 greatest upsets. So number 5, October 17th, 1998. The Temple Owls were a winless 0-16. They were a 35.5-point underdog and taking on an undefeated 14th ranked Virginia Tech Hokies. The Hokies blew a 17-0 lead and allowed Temple to mount a 28-7 run to complete an improbable 28-24 upset win for the Owls in Blacksburg. That's my number 5.
Well, BK, I'm a veteran. I've been in the Navy. I've also been in the Air Force. So when I was looking at notable upsets, one of the teams that kept coming up that I just kind of had to pick a game for them is Notre Dame. They just tend to historically crap the bed in grand fashion. None more so than November 3rd, 2007, when they went against Navy, ended up losing 46-44. And at that point in the game, it was when service schools were kind of frowned upon unless they were playing each other. And Notre Dame took an L from Navy. That's my number 5. What you got for number 4?
Number 4, on 9/11/2010.
Oh, wow. BK, guess what?
What?
Look, we got the same number 4. That's crazy. Go ahead.
Okay. On November 11, 2010, the James Madison Dukes, a 33.5-point underdog, rallied from 16-7 down in the third quarter to upset, guess who? I'm sorry, Virginia Tech folk fans. The Hokies, it happened to them again. They lost 21-16. And why do I bring this up? Because they were James Madison. This was only at the time. Now they're an FBS team. But at the time, it became the second ever FCS team to beat a ranked FBS team. So the Hokies, unfortunately, hit number 5 and 4 in the countdown. What do you got?
Not to mention the fact that Virginia Tech entered the 2010 season ranked at number 10 in the country. They were also the favorite to win the ACC and lost to James Madison. Yeah. So, we have the same number 4. What's your number 3?
Number 3. I don't think anyone is going to remember that this happened. And I'm embarrassed to admit that I actually do remember this game. Which,
no way, BK. We got the same number 3 too.
On September 2nd, great minds think alike. But on September 2nd, 2017, The Howard Bison were a 43.5 point underdog. And this was, in terms of Vegas odds, the biggest upset in college football history when they beat the UNLV Rebels 43-40. And you know why I remember this game? Because you know who the star of the game was?
Who was that?
Cam Newton's brother, Kalen Newton, ran wild for a $190 and 2 touchdowns.
Well, BK, let me give you a slight correction there.
Uh-oh.
UNLV was favored so highly in that matchup, Vegas didn't even give it a line. It was other agencies that actually put a line on it. And the line ended up being 45. And Vegas didn't even put a line on it, but some other agencies put a 45-point line on it, and they lost. I cannot believe that 2 of our top 5 all-time upsets for college football are the exact same. And just so you guys know, we don't compare notes on this part of the show. So, yeah, this isn't us piggybacking on each other. And you know what? I'm 90 based on those 2 being the same. I'm 99% sure number 1 is going to be the same on our list. But let's go ahead and go to number 2.
Number 2, October 6, 2007. Jim Harbaugh, his Stanford Cardinal, were a 40.5 point underdog, and they stunned number 2 Southern Cal 24-23. How did this happen? 5 Trojan turnovers allowed them to hang around. And what's crazy about this upset, not only because Southern Cal was a juggernaut at that time, but Stanford was 1-11 the year before Harbaugh got there. So you had a juggernaut versus a doormat. Nobody expected this to happen. And so, yeah, that was my number 2. What do you have?
This is no one's going to believe this, BK. No one's going to believe it. But that was my number 2 as well. October 6, 2007, 24-23, Stanford over USC. Stanford was a 41-point underdog against USC. And this was one of the games that really put Harbaugh's name out there as one of the guys that was one of those guys. I already know you got Michigan versus Appalachian State number 1, and I do too. This is crazy. We only have one game that was different from each other. That's crazy. September 1st, 2007, 34-32, Appalachian State beats that school up north. They paid Appalachian State $400,000 to come to Ann Arbor, and play the season opener against the Rodents from that school up north. And they beat them at home. I can see, honestly, I don't think it'll be this drastic of a loss, but there are going to be there's some teams that have already taken a loss of a similar nature, but I can see several more. It's just like sometimes you schedule these smaller schools you've already kind of put a check mark in the win column before they get there. And then you forget to show up because you already thought you won the game. And for them, it's their Super Bowl. It's their national championship. And they come up, put their hard hats on, and they go out there and give it their all. But, yeah. What other insights do you have about the Appalachian State-Michigan game that I know you have number 1 as well?
I think for me that was so surprising was App State played terrific in that game, and it was obvious that Michigan overlooked them. But what was crazy is App State kicked a field goal sometime within the last minute of the game to take the lead, and Michigan had a chance to win the game with a field goal that he flailed that kick. I'll never forget it. Like, it never had a chance. And for them to lose in that kicker, like, yikes. But because we plowed through that segment so fast, I'm going to ask you a bonus question.
Okay. What you got?
So The Ravens and Lamar Jackson. We know that Kansas City beat Baltimore last week. And with that, counting the postseason, Lamar's 1-5 against Mahomes. We know that the Chiefs are the measuring stick in the AFC given their Super Bowl titles, right? And they are the defending champs. And they did knock them out last year. Does Lamar have a Mahomes problem?
No. The league has a Mahomes problem. Mahomes is a problem for Josh Allen. He's a problem for Joe Burrow. He's a problem for Lamar. He's a problem for Tom Brady. Yeah, I said it. Yeah. He's not halfway through his career yet. And he's already, don't hear what I'm not saying. He's not nearly the GOAT, but he's already in the conversation. Okay? To not be halfway through your career and be in the conversation, for it to be a foregone conclusion for most that barring injury, no matter what your team looks like, you're most likely going to make this team's offense was an unknown last year. They didn't have much at all other than Patrick Mahomes and an aging Travis Kelce. Last year was the year for someone else to jump out there and take them out. You couldn't do it last year. And the head coach and GM went out and found Rashee Rice. And then, they again this year went out and found Xavier Worthy. They aren't going to get any worse than they were when they won a Super Bowl.
The rich got richer.
This is a league problem, not a Lamar problem. And unfortunately, history, I don't think, is going to look back favorably on several of these quarterbacks that would have been able to either, one, go deeper into the playoffs, or two, put a ring on their finger if it hadn't been for this guy. Lamar might be in a Peyton Manning type of a situation. Peyton Manning he might be in the conversation for being the GOAT if it wasn't for a guy named Tom Brady that he ended up having to go up against and couldn't get past in most years. So, no, this isn't a Lamar problem. This is a league problem. Well, and it isn't going away anytime soon.
Well said.
BK, this next segment is one that a lot of people are dependent on you for. And my guy, you have come through in the clutch all off season with tennis, the Olympics, baseball, like you. I don't know how you do it, but pretty much every sport out there, you can come up with some fire picks. I want to say you went a perfect 8-0 last week, if I am not mistaken. Is that right?
You are right.
Look, I'm not saying, I'm just saying, okay? You may want to turn the volume up a little bit, pay a little bit of closer attention to this segment, because his picks are fire. What you got for the people this week with BK's best bets?
So, couple things. One, I'm going to give you a fun fact before I roll through the things.
Okay.
Bets. So last week, Tennessee played Chicago, and this was an unbelievable stat. So since 2020, underdogs of 4 or more points to at any point lead by 17 or more points during a game, which the Titans led the Bears by 17 or more points and were an underdog of 4 or more points. They were 4, some places 4.5, some markets. Those teams were 66-1-1 against the spread prior to the Titans' loss. 66-1-1, and somehow the Titans found a way to squander that game. And I can't even say the Titans did. Will Levis found a way to single-handedly piss that game away, or throw it away, or fumble it away, or whatever word you want to use. He was like the charity that kept on giving. With that said, the other thing I want to tell you is, because I get questions a lot, whether I'm playing pickleball or hanging out with people, my friends, people say, like, do I have to bet a lot of money to make a lot of money? And the answer is no. I'm going to tell you full transparency, we're in the congregation confessional here. Here it is. I placed 8 $10 bets, $10 bet on each of those games that I won. I did a 2-team parlay for $30, a 3-team parlay for $20, and a 5-team parlay for $25. And that $150, I'm rounding probably a little, but that $150 that I spent netted $1,000. But I didn't put all of it in one game or two games. Those weren't really big bets. I have friends that bet 100, 200 all the time. Listen, yeah, that's not how I roll. We do enough to do what we do, but I say that to say that you too can share in this success, and we're all going to get winners. And please know one other thing. A lot of my friends ask, how can you bet on somebody that a team you hate? Like, for instance, last week I bet on the Steelers. I don't like the Steelers. I bet on the Eagles. I'm not an Eagles fan. I don't like the Cowboys at all. But at the end of the day, my wallet and bank account don't care. I bet against the Commanders, who I like. Why? Because I'm here to make money. It's not about who I like. That said, some of these we released on our Facebook page, so check it out. Steelers, we're going to continue to ride that wagon. And I know, Zay, you're going to love this bet. Pittsburgh -2.5 against Denver. So I just watched a veteran quarterback, Kirk Cousins, look like a high school quarterback.
Is that lying wrong? Like, no, that just doesn't, like, that defense against a rookie quarterback in their 2.5. I don't mean to be rude, but I need to place that bet before it changes.
I'm going to let you continue doing your thing and making money. Those of you, while Zay's making money, and you guys should go to your phone too. Best bet number 2, the Chargers. We just got done talking earlier in this show about how bad the Panthers are. Remember the Panthers that gave up 5,000 points to the Saints? In fact, I think the Saints are still scoring. Well, in come the Chargers. They're a 5.5-point road favorite over the Panthers. Do you really think Harbaugh and Herbert are going to lose with that defense to the Panthers? Lock it in. Chargers -5.5. While we're speaking of this, I know the 49ers are on a short week. I know they had a big Monday night win over the Jets Jets. But somehow you can get the 49ers -5 at Minnesota against Sam Darnold? Like, look, I know that the Giants made the Vikings look like the second coming of a playoff team. The Vikings are terrible. There's a reason why they were picked to finish last in the division, only because the Giants are so bad that only the Panthers, for those of you who liked the show The League out there when it was out there, like if there was a Sacco, it would literally be the Giants and the Panthers. They would be locks for that title game because they're terrible. Panthers -5. While we're rolling, 49ers -5. Texans -5 over the Bears. I just watched the Bears get run out of the building for 3 quarters against the Titans. I think the Texans are a little bit better than the Titans. The Texans are at home. I don't think Caleb can throw a touchdown pass at this point, at least to his team. So I like the Texans -5. A couple of teaser games. I do like the Chiefs. They're -5. Move that to +1. The Eagles are -6. Move that to the money line. The Ravens are -8. Move that to -2. Those are the NFL best bets. As far as some college best bets, here's some things to think about. Gamecocks +7, +7.5. Purdue +11. Purdue is coming off a bye at home against Notre Dame. Yes, I know Notre Dame was embarrassed. Yes, I know they're going to be motivated. Yes, I know they're going to be angry. But here's what you don't know. Their offense sucks. And what's worse, here's the other problem. Purdue can run and throw, and they're at home coming off a bye, and they are great at upsetting ranked teams. Unfortunately, our Buckeyes know this because they've gotten the Buckeyes twice. By the way, did you guys happen to notice that a certain quarterback in Notre Dame's playing with a torn labrum in his non-throwing shoulder? As soon as he gets hit, he's going to have a problem. Purdue plus 11. Oh, speaking of, remember, Zay, you told me and you told the congregation the Oregon Ducks are overrated? They're laying 16 and a half in the Civil War in Corvallis against the Beavers. Now,
16 and a half?
16 and a half. Do you know that? Do you think maybe now that Oregon State is in the Pac 12 almost by themselves and got left high and dry, do you think they're going to be motivated at home against their rivals? Look, I need them to win. They just need to lose by 2.5 scores or less. Love the Beavers. Also, two more, and then we'll wrap it up. Washington in another rivalry game, bitter rivalry game, the Apple Cup. The Huskies minus 4.5 against Wazoo. Washington has won 9 of the last 10. You can make that come Saturday, 10 out of 11. The Huskies minus 4.5. They'll win that. And last but not least, I gave this one earlier. The Georgia Bulldogs minus 23 at Kentucky. I'm not a transitive kind of bettor, but if South Carolina went in as a 10-point underdog and paced them 31-6, how do you think the best team in college football is going to be? Georgia, who literally is absolutely hammered everybody and everything. I like Georgia minus 23. And just a reminder, last week's two biggest college best bets, Texas, how did that turn out? Oh, yeah, they're still scoring on Michigan. And Tennessee, 44-10 over the Wolfpack. Woof. So those are the best bets for this week. Lock them in. I know Zay did, but we're going to make some money. We're going to have some fun watching this week.
Absolutely. Absolutely cannot. Like, a few of these games just seem off. Like a few of these lines just don't seem quite right. But yeah, they are what they are, and we're going to capitalize on them. So thank you very much for your due diligence there, sir.
Always
now, what was that?
Always a pleasure.
Last segment of the show. Can't miss weekly rants. You want to go first, or you want me to go? Matter of fact, you know what? Let me go first this week, because I think that your rant is going to be a little bit more exhaustive and detailed. My rant is pretty simple.
Is that the polite way of saying that I'm long-winded? Thanks, Zay. I appreciate that.
Not at all. This is it's the polite way of saying that after your rant, I'll put it this way. I don't want to go after you, because I have a feeling that some feelings that you have had over the last couple of years, with reason, are going to spill over a little bit. And this particular issue for me is not an issue with an individual. It's more of an issue with fans. So those don't get quite as much seasoning, if you will. So I'll put it that way.
What you got?
I just want to ensure that everyone understands the acronym or the abbreviation MVP. It stands for most valuable player, not most popular player. Okay. Let me put this out here first. I am a Fever fan. I am a Caitlin Clark fan. I am an Aaliyah Boston fan. That is actually my favorite WNBA team, the Fever. Okay. Let me put that out there first. But if you think for a half a second that anybody in their right mind thinks that Caitlin Clark should be anything more than the rookie of the year, which that's solidified it. No conversation there. Asia Wilson is the MVP, and it's not close. Okay. Asia Wilson has averaged 27.3 points to Caitlin Clark's 19.1, 11.9 rebounds to Caitlin Clark's 5.7. The only stat that Caitlin Clark leads her in is assists, which she's a point guard, so she should. That's 8.4 for Caitlin Clark, 2.3 assists for Asia Wilson. Even steals, 1.9 for Wilson, 1.3 for Caitlin Clark. This is not a poo-poo Caitlin Clark session. Again, she is my favorite player. I just want to put that out there. But this isn't about who's the hottest or who's the most popular. It's supposed to be about who the most valuable player of the league is. Not the most valuable player to their team, even, which I still believe that Asia Wilson, humble opinion, still carries that torch. But please don't go overboard with your fanhood for Caitlin Clark and take away someone else's flowers, who honestly, Asia Wilson should have been the MVP last year, if we're going to keep it a buck. That's neither here nor there, and I won't get off on that tangent. But it would be a travesty if Caitlin Clark won the MVP. As much of a travesty as if Caitlin Clark didn't win Rookie of the Year. That's my truth and nothing but the truth. That's my rant. What you got, BK?
Oh boy. I think I'm going to upset some people back home. Although in fairness, from a lot of my friends back in the CLE, aka Cleveland, I think they're right there with me. We'll see what people think. Deshaun Watson is not only a problem on the field, but most importantly, a problem off the field. And I'm going to focus on the off the field issues for the most part during this little history lesson. Back in 2020, there were more than 24 lawsuits filed by massage therapists in Houston accusing Watson of sexually assaulting him. 24 lawsuits from female massage therapists. Not one, not two, more than 24. I just need to make sure that you all follow me on that. So new year, 2024, same old story. Watson was once again sued by a woman earlier this week who claimed that Watson sexually assaulted her on a date back in 2020. Now, forget about his dreadful performance on the field. And let's do a little history lesson with that. Because in 2021, let's backtrack. In 2020, at the end of the season, Deshaun Watson was a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. That's a fact. In 2021, he sat out the entire season over a contract dispute. That's also a fact. In 2022, he was suspended for the first 11 games for violating the NFL's personal conduct policy. Now, having lived in Cleveland for most of my life, and I know more than most how passionate and loyal Browns fans are. There's the reason why they go at most of the years, in the last 20 years, they've gone 3-13 or 2-14, and they still sell out every damn game. You have to be loyal to do that and sit in cold weather half the season. But the constant theme from those that I pulled were simple. We love our Browns. We'll never support and can't stand Watson. And unfortunately for the Browns fans, for those of us who were in the just cut Watson now mode, it has devastating financial consequences for the Browns. In 2024, if they cut him now, he would count $120 million against their cap this year in dead money, 93.2 million in cash. Next year, almost 81 million. And if they wait till after the season, the dead cap for next year, 115 million, 92 million in cash again. It doesn't drop significantly until 2026. So 2 more years of him before that price tag significantly drops. Here's my issue. The Browns sold their soul to make Watson the highest ever paid quarterback at that time. 5 years, $230 million guaranteed. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with NFL contracts, most of the time when they get this big money, not all of it's guaranteed. In this case, the full thing was guaranteed. And they intentionally chose to put his great talent at the time, top 5 quarterback at the time, over his character. Only in Cleveland does a top 5 quarterback become literally unplayable and unwatchable, while their former quarterback, top pick, who they couldn't chase out of town fast enough, goes out of town to another team and continues to shine. Yep, that Baker Mayfield. By the way, 4 touchdowns in 289 last week against the Commanders. Only in Cleveland does this stuff happen. They have nobody to blame but themselves. And you know what? For the contract, I blame almost everything on Watson here, because 24 women aren't wrong. But here's the thing. Well, he's responsible for his character and his terrible decision making in all of it. You can't fix stupid. But speaking of can't fix stupid, you know who's really to blame for this? Browns ownership. Mr. and Mrs. Haslam, this is why they're one of the 5 bottom owners in the NFL. Because you paid somebody who has zero character $230 million when you know he's a walking train wreck. What are we doing? And that is my rant and nothing but the truth.
BK, let me add one thing to your rant, if you don't mind, kind sir.
Of course.
I'm a conspiracy theorist to the heart. I believe where there's smoke, that there's fire. I don't necessarily know that maybe, just maybe, the Browns don't have something to do with this news coming out right now, or that they aren't a little bit, happy about the news coming out. Because if I recall correctly, there's a clause via the NFL or possibly from the Browns themselves that if there were any undisclosed incidents that come to light, that contract can be voided and that he would face additional suspension. It would kind of be one of those conduct detrimental to the team type clauses within the contract. And I don't know that the Browns wouldn't necessarily be knocking on that young lady's door and trying to figure out if they can't figure out a way to make the situation, how would I say, to make her make sure that she says something that will trigger such clauses. So I'm just throwing that out there, because if you can make it shake with Joe Flacco, you can figure out another quarterback and hope for the best. You can definitely pay someone a whole lot less and get a few other positions out there. But that's just a conspiracy theory I'll throw out there for you and the people. Maybe the Browns won't be quite as stuck as they thought they were going to be with this contract.
And for their sakes, I hope they're not, because since the start of 2021, Zay, and I know he missed almost 2 seasons, right? But you're paying $230 million for a guy who has 15 touchdowns and 11 picks. Does that sound like a top 5 quarterback? That doesn't sound like a top 35 quarterback, and there's only 32 teams. Like, he's somehow making Daniel Jones look good. And that's hard to do.
Yeah, Daniel Jones has essentially gotten paid $25 million per touchdown that he has scored since he signed that contract. So it's pretty hard to do. but Watson just figured out a way to do it.
Touche.
And that's the truth.
You'll
That'll
have
put
you'll have a good week. And before we wrap it up, just a couple things. Guys, we're getting closer to November 6th. This is not a political thing other than to say make sure that you register to vote. Very important. Number two, there's too many animals in the shelters, dogs and cats that are getting put down. Go out there and adopt, please. These furry friends need our help. So please do both of those things. And that, my friends, is my truth.
Lastly, if you have not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, at the Gospel STP, again, that's at the Gospel STP, you can not only hear the podcast for those of you guys that listen to us on all the most popular podcast apps, you'll also be able to see us there as well as on the Facebook channel, and that's the Gospel Sports Truth Facebook group. We'll see you at one or the other or both. For this week, we out. Remember, Tuesday, there's going to be a third show, and you're going to get all three of the gospel personalities on one show. It's going to be great. Make sure you don't miss it. As far as podcast is concerned, it'll probably show up in your apps on Wednesday, but we're going to try to make it a live broadcast, so it should be out on Tuesday as far as YouTube and the Facebook group is concerned. Until then, remember, tell the truth.
And nothing but the truth. Later, y'all.